There's a strange kind of financial failure that doesn't feel like failure at all. You still go to work every day. Your salary arrives right on time. All your bills are paid. Nothing dramatic breaks. And there's no major crisis. And yet, somehow, year after year, your life just feels a little tighter, a little heavier, a little more fragile. It's not because you did something reckless, but because something invisible has been quietly working against you. Most people never even notice it until it's far too late, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. This is the invisible decline. Most middle-class families believe their financial health is stable simply because their income looks stable. The number on the paycheck hasn't collapsed. In some cases, it might have even increased a little bit. This creates a false sense of safety, a feeling that things are basically fine. But this is where the first illusion begins. Your income is not the same as your buying power, and your buying power is what actually determines whether your life is moving forward or slowly shrinking. Over the last several years, the cost of living has changed in ways that are difficult to feel day by day, but are absolutely devastating over time. Think about it. Housing absorbs more of your income, but it doesn't seem dramatic month to month. Groceries quietly demand more of your money, even though what's in your cart hasn't really changed. Insurance, healthcare, utilities, your subscriptions, all of them rise just enough to feel annoying, but not alarming. And because these increases are spread across so many different categories, our brains don't register them as a single major threat. It just registers them as normal life. This is how decline hides, not through a crisis, but through normalization. At the exact same time, lifestyle inflation sneaks in almost invisibly. I'm not talking about luxury, not extravagance. I'm talking about the small, reasonable upgrades. A slightly better phone plan, a car payment that feels manageable, eating out a little more often because you're tired and time feels scarce. These decisions don't feel like mistakes because they don't look like mistakes. They look like well-deserved rewards for working hard. But here is the problem. When your income growth barely keeps pace with inflation or doesn't keep pace at all, these reasonable upgrades are quietly locking up your future income before it even arrives. What makes this especially dangerous is that most of us are tracking the wrong signals. We track whether our bills are paid, not whether our financial flexibility is shrinking. We track our credit score, not our margin for error. We look at our net pay, but we don't compare what that pay can actually buy today versus what it could buy 5 years ago. As long as the system hasn't completely broken down, it feels functional. But a system can be perfectly functional and still be slowly decaying from the inside. One of the clearest silent warning signs is the disappearance of financial slack. Do emergencies feel more stressful than they used to? Does saving feel harder even when your income hasn't dropped? Do decisions that once felt easy now require careful calculation? When this happens, people tell themselves they just need to be more disciplined, more motivated, or more careful with their money. But discipline isn't the problem here. The entire structure has changed, and most people are still playing by old rules, without even realizing the game has been rigged against them. This is exactly why so many hard-working households feel like they're running faster and faster on a treadmill but not getting anywhere. The ground beneath them is slowly lowering, but because it's lowering evenly and gradually, there's no single moment that triggers the alarm. And as long as nothing collapses, the mind just assumes that nothing is wrong. But something is deeply wrong, and it has less to do with your personal effort and more to do with outdated assumptions about money that no longer match our modern reality. Recognizing this is the first step to fighting back. Most people are still living by money rules that were never designed for the world they are in now. These rules once worked well enough that they became invisible assumptions, passed down without question. The problem is not that people are responsible. The problem is that they are loyal to rules that quietly stopped working years ago. One of the most damaging assumptions is the belief that income growth alone protects you. If your salary increases every few years, it feels like progress. But very few people adjust that number for what it actually buys. When income rises by 3% while essential costs rise faster, The result is not stability, it is a slow erosion disguised as success. Because the paycheck is bigger, the mind relaxes, and because the mind relaxes, the erosion goes unnoticed. Another broken rule is tying spending directly to income instead of to long-term capacity. When money comes in, life expands to meet it. This feels natural and justified. But expansion is rarely reversed. Once a cost becomes part of your normal life, it stops feeling optional. Over time, income becomes pre-committed to obligations made under very different cost conditions. What once felt flexible becomes fixed, and fixed costs are unforgiving when reality shifts. Credit plays a quiet but critical role in masking this decay. Credit does not create wealth. It creates continuity. It allows a lifestyle to continue even when the underlying numbers no longer support it. Because the transition is smooth, not abrupt, it feels harmless. A balance here, a payment there. The system still runs. But what credit actually does is remove the feedback signal that something is wrong. It delays consequence, not cost. This is why many households feel financially fine while becoming structurally weaker. Savings rates decline first, but that is often rationalized as temporary. Emergency funds shrink, but that is blamed on timing. Long-term planning is postponed, not rejected. Nothing feels like a clear mistake, and so nothing changes. What makes this especially dangerous is psychological adaptation. Humans adapt quickly to reduced options. When flexibility shrinks, expectations shrink with it. People stop imagining better outcomes and start managing constraints. They don't feel poorer because they adjust their definition of normal. This adaptation keeps stress low in the short term, but it locks people into systems that quietly limit their future. These broken rules survive because they don't cause immediate pain. They cause delayed limitation. And delayed limitation is easy to ignore until choices disappear. But there is another way to think about money that doesn't rely on motivation, discipline, or constant effort, a way that doesn't fight reality, but accounts for it. The first thing to understand is that escaping this quiet decline doesn't require radical changes or overnight transformation. It begins with seeing the rules you've been following for decades and asking whether they actually work today. Financially aware people do not rely on discipline alone. They rely on structure. They design their money systems to account for reality rather than hope it will behave differently. A simple, yet powerful approach is to separate income from lifestyle immediately. Instead of letting each raise or bonus feed discretionary spending, a portion is automatically allocated to real wealth-building channel savings, investments, or debt reduction before life claims it. The key is automation, not sacrifice. When the system removes choice, you remove error. You stop being vulnerable to your own adaptation. Another rule reframed is to treat credit as a tool, not a crutch. Instead of allowing credit to mask structural weaknesses, it should amplify capacity in a controlled, predictable way. For example, a credit line can cover predictable fluctuations or emergencies but never ongoing lifestyle. By imposing boundaries, you create signals that reflect real limitations, not illusions of stability. Financial clarity comes when the numbers reflect reality, not desire. Finally, the long-term mindset shift is less about planning every dollar and more about designing for optionality. Financially aware people constantly maintain room to maneuver. They understand that life is uncertain, inflation is persistent, and costs shift without warning. By keeping flexibility, they avoid adaptation traps and retain the power to make choices. Flexibility becomes the measure of wealth more than any figure in a bank account. The point is not to chase perfection. It is to acknowledge the hidden dynamics quietly eroding stability, and to implement rules that respect reality. Small structural changes, consistently applied, compound over time. What seems invisible today, the subtle erosion of buying power, the creeping lifestyle. Inflation can be halted and even reversed with systems, not sheer effort. When these rules are reframed and followed, what once felt like invisible decline transforms into measured, controlled growth. The quiet danger fades, not with panic, but with clarity, and clarity, in the end, is the truest form of financial power.